find out. Everything runs through
TechNTortillas.
Everything runs through
TechNTortillas.
Thank y'all for joining us for Tortilla Talk today. With me is Dallas. Dallas, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. This is the first weekend in a while that we haven't had to stress out a Tech win. We could just kick back and watch some college football. So that was fun, but also kind of missed it. Kind of missed winning some games. So hopefully we can get back to that this coming week.
Yeah, it's funny you said stressed out. I think we were texting on Friday, and we knew exactly what was going to happen, and we called it. Arizona State obviously beats Utah, and luckily they didn't rank Arizona State, but we just knew we weren't going to make it in the top 25. But we'll get to that later in the show. Want to thank y'all all for listening for us. If y'all could do us a favor and like and subscribe this video, we appreciate the support from y'all. And with that, we got a couple of topics we're going to cover today. We're going to cover around the Big 12. We're going to talk about some contenders and pretenders. Next, we'll get into the top 25, and then we'll do a Baylor and Texas Tech preview. With that being said, we also have a couple of people missing. So Nick and Dylan aren't able to join us. There's a sickness going through the Dementia family right now. My little sister is having a baby, and we were at a baby shower. And I'm actually going to say it was a hit put out on from the AP Top 25 for the people that love Dallas. They didn't try to take Dallas out. They took the people he loves out. And that was because of the strength of record rant that he went on last week. They know that Dallas has too much knowledge, and they are taking out the people that love him, and that is the Dementia family. Dallas, care to comment on that?
That was a roundabout way to say I was pissed off about the poll today, but the AP top 25 frauds is more like it. I can't believe, I know this has been kind of a wild start to the college football season, but there are just some real obvious exclusions and inclusions that were just wrong, man. Like,
yeah,
we've watched these teams play. I think we know what Michigan is, and I think we all know that they don't have a quarterback and aren't belonging of a top 25 spot. We love our armed services, but Army Navy have not even played a Power 4 school yet, so I think it might be a little premature to rank those teams. We go on and on about some of the other rankings, maybe. A few snubs in the top 10 that I think Big 12 teams should be right to be pissed off about. But man, it was crazy. I think most people agreed with us. Even fans of other teams. I feel like I don't think I've in a while seen so many other teams give Tech props. There still are a fair share of haters, but I think people know that our resume is deserving of being ranked.
Yeah, and we'll get into it in a little bit. I just was curious about how you felt about AP poll coming for my family. And so
yeah, it's brutal.
It's brutal. Just I'm sure they'll do another hit after when we get into the AP Top 25 today too. But with that, we'll kick it off with the Big 12. So there were 5 games played this week. We're in conference play. How exciting, right? Their teams are starting to separate themselves. So we had a game on Friday and 4 on Saturday. So with that, we'll start with the Utah-Arizona State game. Cam Rising exists. He played. So Utah loses that game 19-27 to Arizona State, a really good team who Texas Tech beat. Dallas, what did you think about that game?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said Cam Rising exists. For Utah fans' sake, I hope that wasn't the real Cam Rising. Hopefully that was a fraud wearing his jersey out there, because boy, do they stink. They are a bad football team, and it's really not just, hey, we're missing our quarterback. We got bullied at the line of scrimmage by Arizona State like the whole night. The Arizona State, actually after the first quarter, I was like, Arizona State's a better team. They're going to win this game. And they did. That Cam Rising throws 3 picks, just like horrible decisions. He can't hardly throw the ball, and Cam Scadaboo is doing whatever he wants against that defensive front in Utah. Who, dude, he's fun to watch. and our Red Raiders shut him down on the ground. At least he did bust a couple screenplays for some yards, but man, I really enjoyed pulling up some receipts that we had saved for the Utah fans there.
Yeah, the first thing I said when I woke up on what was it, Sunday, I said, "Who's the little troll on the receipt page?" And, you were hitting them early and often, but they were pretty funny. And something you said, it was really alarming, the defensive side of the ball for Utah. Like, that's something they hang their hat on, and it did not look great for Utah, not one bit. And Cameron is obviously a cause for concern. You hope that it didn't look like he was healthy, to say the least. I think he got hit early, and it looked like it impacted him the rest of the game. So I don't know if that will be something that continues for the rest of the season, if he'll play next game. But yeah, it was pretty evident who the better team was in that game. And, Utah's falling out of a contender. They're probably in that middle range right now. Obviously, with the talent they have, they could come back, but we'll see.
Well, and how about, a lot of people coming into the season said Kyle Whittingham's the best coach in the country. How about him calling up a play where literally 5 seconds after his quarterback clearly rolled his ankle and is hobbled, he calls a play to send his quarterback running out towards the sideline on a trick play. He's like limping and almost falling over, just trying to move out in motion, and then sticks with the guy the entire game, even after he's throwing interceptions and doesn't look strong.
No. Yeah. It just didn't look like there was any zip on his ball either. Like, yeah, he's playing hurt, and credit to him, but sometimes it's to the team's detriment, and you got to keep that guy healthy. And he's just not quite there yet, it looks like. And some of that was from the Arizona State team that hammered him home. So Arizona State takes that one. Tech looks a little, if we talk about beating the bye week, that was the first step to beating the bye week. So kudos to Arizona State.
14-0 lead, start the first.
That's right. That's how you kick it off, and we got into a 14-point lead. All right, next we got Iowa State versus West Virginia. Iowa State trails early, finds after the first quarter, though, they figured it out, and it wasn't much of a game after that. Iowa State beats West Virginia 28-16. What stuck out to you there?
I think there's clearly a trend with Iowa State now. I mean, they start slow against Iowa. They start slow against Houston. They start slow against Baylor, and then they start slow against West Virginia. I don't know which team they are. Are they the first half team that just can't get it rolling, or is this just a team that needs to get in the groove and settle into a game before they, look like a top 10 team? Because second half of these games they've looked dominant, but I'm not sure what. I maybe it's their schemed plays to start the game. Are those just horrible? I can't get it because they've looked really bad to start some of these games. I mean, and against not good teams, especially Houston and Baylor. So, I think they are a contender. I think they're up there, at the top group of the Big 12, say BYU, Tech, Iowa State, maybe Kansas State. I go back and forth on them, but yeah, that group there. But I kind of want to see, and Tech, I want to see them play a complete game, start to finish.
Yeah, you're starting to get with these teams at the top of the conference, and obviously there's, weaknesses in every team. But you brought up playing a full game for Iowa State, and Tech's defense was an issue for a little bit. It seems like they're starting to figure it out, and even offense when we start playing better teams too. We'll want to see that. But yeah, we're halfway through the season. You want to see them start putting all the puzzle pieces together. For me, for this game, would have liked to see West Virginia put up a little more of a fight at home. With that last touchdown they got, they made it a little bit more respectable. But they really struggled. And I know Garrett Green's, he was hurt or was getting hurt. It looks like pretty frequently. But Iowa State has a pretty banged up team as well. And so for them to go in a rivalry game and to handle business was really impressive. Beck keeps playing very well, doesn't make hardly any mistakes, honestly. Run game didn't look too dominant. Obviously, they went to it often, but their top rusher was a hair under 4 yards a carry. So you touched on our run defense against Scadaboo. Like that's something that when we look, a couple games ahead, we'll really have to pay attention to and eliminate, hopefully, with that one. Next, we have Arizona versus BYU. Whew, not great. Arizona 19, BYU 41. I'm starting to think that Arizona's falling to a pretender. That didn't look good. Hopefully wish we would have beat them by more. Obviously, we were playing in Arizona, but BYU's looking like a contender now. They were already a contender, but they're looking like more of a contender now too.
Yeah, they're starting to look legit. Like this is where, they got us off to a slow start, and I remember that SMU game where it looked like Jake Retzloff couldn't throw the ball downfield at all. Like he looked horrible, and he is improved dramatically week by week. I think that defense for BYU, especially in Provo, that is probably the toughest place to play in the conference. Like realistically, I think the Jones is tough, but there's something about those screaming Mormons, some yelling at you, but also encouraging you. Like the
good job,
team,
buddy.
I think it's a really strange environment and some altitude, and so I don't. BYU, like looking ahead at their remaining schedule, it's very favorable. Like I don't see there's a way that they lose more than one game. And with the win they already have against Kansas State, and they don't play Tech. I don't think they play Iowa State. They can lose a game and still get in comfortably. So I think they're firmly in the contender spot, obviously, with a 6-0 record.
Yeah, I want to touch on the BYU fan base. I was, as it was a bye week, I was trying to put some content together. So I've made some shorts with Dylan's Toby Keith, Big 12 that he did, a few months ago. And so for BYU, he brought up, how he doesn't understand how it's a hard place to play at when they can't have fun up there. And one of their fans comments, he goes, "Well, buddy, you just got to come up. We'll show you a good time." It's just like the most like Dylan was talking a little mess, and the guy was just so nice and like, "Hey, come on up. We'll show you how it's done." But it was really funny.
I think it just totally throws you off. I saw Baskerville talk about how, it's the strangest thing because they're so excited just for you to be there, like getting to experience Provo and stuff. It's like you're supposed to be mad at me, man. Like I think it might take edges off of teams because sometimes you go into like an opposing stadium and students are cussing at you, they're getting pissed at you. It's kind of like a us against the world kind of thing. But I mean, you're over on the bench and guys are saying, "Hey, nice try. Like you'll get them next time." Like that's demoralizing when you're getting killed.
Yeah, it's like Timmy D's trash talk. He's like, "Got him."
It's very similar to
Nice.
Timmy D.
Nice work, little guy.
Yeah. Kind of belittling.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we had a little bit of separation in that game. Fafita looks a little worrisome, only completing 50% of his pass on a bulk of attempts with 52. So yikes.
And
but
did you see Brent Brennan? This is like the third game in a row I've seen that like their offense routinely just is running different plays, like one wide receiver to the next. They're all like completely disorganized, which I don't understand how that happens halfway through a college football season.
You know what? Now that you say that too, there were a couple of plays. I mean, you mentioned where the tight end was coming across the play and he was wide open against Tech and just completely missed him. I wonder if he was running the wrong route or something, but he was open and Fafita just doesn't throw him the ball.
He could just be short too.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Next, we have Cincinnati UCF. Good game. Cincinnati ends up holding on, pulling it out, 19-13 here. Two middle of the pack teams, actually. UCF looks like they're trending downwards, while Cincinnati has been a lot better than people think. Maybe they're kind of flip-flopping on the expectations, honestly. Cincinnati's replacing what people thought UCF was going to be, and UCF's going to the bottom of the conference. So I think you had a pretender there. And I don't know if they're necessarily a contender, but they're frisky. Thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I think frisky's like a good term to use for Cincy because I mean I thought that they played Tech better than Arizona State did. I thought Tech kind of kept Arizona State at arm's length and was able to hold on to that game more firmly. We had to rely on a missed field goal against Cincy at the end of
Yeah.
that game.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
and Sorsby, he threw a couple more picks. He's been cursed ever since that announcer against Tech, but. Yeah, I think he's still a really good quarterback, even with those few mistakes he's made. And, if you're a Cincinnati fan, I know that you're kicking yourself because you totally blow a game against a 6-0 Pitt team who I have no idea how they're 6-0. And then I'm sure they think that they blew a game against Tech, even though, we had a 2-possession lead late in that game. But
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think that they're good enough to hang with just about anybody in the conference, but I don't know if they're going to be consistent enough to win enough games to have a shot, even at Arlington.
Yeah, that's all I gotta say about that game. I think they're, right in the middle of the Big 12, and we'll see what they'll do. So we'll move on to the next one. UCF's obviously very disappointing with some of the talent they have on that team. And then the last game of the night, Kansas State versus Colorado. What a game! Great game, fun game to watch. I was baffled by some of the decision making towards the end of the game from Kansas State. When I was watching it, they were running the ball so effectively, and to abandon the run game completely with 4 or 5 minutes left made no sense to me. Avery Johnson started throwing it, and they end up barely taking any time off the clock and giving it back to Colorado, who then goes down and scores. And I think had they obviously not won that game, we'd probably be having a conversation about the mismanagement of that clock. But they go into Colorado, pull it out in Boulder, not an easy place to play. Colorado gets really banged up with Harvey Lee. I don't even know if Harvey played or not Harvey, Horn. And then what's his name? Plays
Travis
both ways. Yep, Travis Hunter injured. I think in the first quarter, one of the first drives doesn't come back, and so really bad for them on the injury train. But what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I'm still unsure about what Kansas State is. I do not trust Avery Johnson to be able to pass the ball when he really needs to. Obviously he made the big throw at the end of that game to eventually win them the game, but he's still. I feel like you play against an Iowa State who's really good against the run and can maybe limit some of what Giddens does on the ground. Are they going to be able to move the ball at all against them? So I've got questions about them. Colorado, if they stay healthy during that game, I think they win. Now there's obviously questions going forward because if they drop another game in the conference and they've got a tougher schedule, that they're probably out of it. But it's crazy that they were in that game and had negative 40 rushing yards.
Yeah, negative 29. I mean, gosh, Shador takes so many sacks. It's baffling. But they stay in game.
Well, he'll sit there for forever and take a sack, but every time he does that, the next play somebody gets open downfield and they're able to move it.
He made almost some pretty bad mistakes from it. There were a couple that almost looked like they were going to get picked off, and obviously some of the intentional groundings too.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely prone to try to be the hero. It's clear that he doesn't want to. I mean, what was the game earlier in the season where they almost screwed up because he checks out of a run and tries to throw a deep ball? Was that the first game against North Dakota State or whatever?
Yeah, I think so.
South Dakota State. And, so I think some of his decision-making, I questioned some of Deion's decision-making late in games. I mean, that 4th and 5 to throw the fade route with a safety over the top there with the game on the line was crazy. And I don't know if that's a Deion call or a, Sanders trying to be the hero again. But, that team, it's talented, but they just get in the way of themselves.
Yeah, and credit for that team. I mean, they showed a lot of resolve with having to go turn over pretty much all their receivers. They throw the ball an awful lot. I mean, Shador still was 34 for 40, so still a really great performance. But he was also sacked an awful lot. They almost did enough, but it wasn't quite. Avery Johnson goes out with an injury for not even the whole drive. He comes back for the goal line possession. So that was a little interesting. I'm not quite sure what that was, but the backup looks pretty decent. So if something were to happen, that guy's a veteran. He's a senior that has starting experience. So they should at least be able to contend, which I don't think there's anything wrong with Avery Johnson anyway. But two teams got a little banged up in this game, so it'll be definitely interesting to see what happens going forward. I would say they're both contenders this week, but we'll definitely figure something out over the next couple of weeks. With that being said, I'll pull up the standings real quick. And so we'll run through the top. Let me take off. All right. So in the standings, top to bottom, we got a couple of undefeated teams. Yours truly, Texas Tech, along with Iowa State and BYU. Anything? So in the top half, Dallas. So it goes after that: Kansas State, Arizona State, Cincinnati, Colorado, West Virginia, and I would probably say after, with West Virginia being a question mark, is where I start. I think the gap is. If I had to draw another line, I'd probably put after Arizona State, with Colorado being a tweener, and Cincinnati being closer to West Virginia. What are your overall thoughts with the current standings?
I think if you look at just looking at Kansas State, the points for and points against, that kind of jumps out at me. They're 2-1, but have more points scored against them than they've scored against conference opponents. Obviously with that blowout against BYU. But I think you can just chunk it up into like the rankings. I think there's a clear top tier right now. Who's 3-0 in the conference? Those teams. Who's 2-1 in the conference? I think I could clump all of those teams together right now. Maybe West Virginia is that tweener, and then UCF's 1-2, but their win is against a just dreadful TCU team. I think you might have like Arizona and Utah kind of in that middle of the pack with West Virginia, like in that third tier, and then everybody else kind of after them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think definitely it's feels a little more top heavy right now. Obviously, a lot of graphics out there saying that the Big 12, there's not going to be much variance in spreads, which there hasn't been. Everybody can play each other and you can lose any night, which is true. But I do think looking at it at a game-to-game basis, there is a divide at least. And I think you nailed it with how you explained it.
I do think that you mentioned the spreads, and I just saw this on Twitter. I have not fact-checked this, but somebody said today that BYU has covered the spread by double digits in every single one of their games.
Wow.
Which seems impossible.
I wouldn't be surprised because we just saw their score differential in the Big 12, and it was pretty hefty. So I wouldn't be surprised.
That's like, the AP poll's not giving them any respect, but I mean, they're blowing the doors off of what Vegas thinks about them.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their wins. They played SMU close, but I don't know what the spread was in that game.
I bet SMU was heavy favorites because BYU coming into the year was picked like 13th in the conference.
SMU was 12.5-point favorite. Wyoming, they beat the brakes off Wyoming. They don't even have their differential listed, but they won by over 20 points. Kansas State, they were probably a dog, and they won by 20 points. Baylor, I can't imagine they were a dog in this game, so that'd be the only one. Baylor was favored 3.5, and they won by 6. So plus, yeah. So that's 9.5. And then this last one against Arizona where they just blew them out of the water. So, I mean, it's pretty close to being accurate.
At least 2 possessions in every game. That's nuts.
Which has been really impressive. But that, that's around the Big 12. Happy to get back into play. There were a lot of teams that had bye weeks, and we'll have a few more games to talk about this upcoming week. But with that, I know you're very passionate about the AP Top 25, as am I. I was very frustrated on Friday when Arizona State. I love that Arizona State beat Utah, but what I thought was going to happen was they were going to put Arizona State at 25 and leave Tech out. They left both of us out. I believe Arizona State got more votes, though. However, Dallas, I'm going to hand it off to you and let you cook.
Yeah, I mean, I think Arizona State was 26th and Tech was 30th. So that's even like a bigger gap than maybe we were expecting. Dude, this conference is so disrespected. I mentioned earlier BYU being left out of the top 10. They've got the number 3 strength of record in the country. They've beaten 2 conference contenders, one in SMU in the ACC and one in Kansas State in the Big 12. They just blew the doors off of Arizona, who won 10 games last year. I do not understand how BYU is not ranked higher. Arizona or Iowa State, I think, is ranked appropriately. But, there's a lot of people on Twitter like saying, ignore the AP poll, doesn't matter. And I get that, but it does matter. Especially in this day and age of college football, when your lifeblood of the TV revenue, all of that, the public perception of your program has never been more important. And so, getting that number next to your name does mean something, even if it's only for a few games. And Tech has top 25 strength of record. They've beaten FBS. Their 5 wins against FBS schools, ironically, have a 806 winning percentage against other teams, not Tech, which is best in the country. A Tech guy tweeted that out earlier today. I don't understand the disrespect when you've got teams in there like I brought up Army, Navy, which, sorry to disrespect, but they've played nobody. Boise State's just destroying teams who have bottom 100 rushing defenses, and they have a Heisman contender running back. This is ridiculous. And, I know the college football playoff poll will come out here in a few weeks, but it'll be the day after or 2 days after we play Iowa State. And, let's say we go 2-1 over the next 3 games. That should still be enough to get Tech ranked. If we beat Baylor this weekend, that should be enough to get Tech ranked in the AP Top 25. And if it isn't, then we need to have some serious discussions about, is there a true conspiracy at the Associated Press?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't like, to your point, that that will happen after the Iowa State game. We still got to stack a couple wins on top of each other. But when you look at our resume, there's just a whole bunch of parity in the league in general. They put a lot of value into beating Utah, and we've beat both the teams that have beaten Utah. And so that's something that's, I think, should be valued. And when I look at the teams that are at the top, I think obviously the top teams are the top teams. But even looking at Tennessee, who almost loses to Florida this on Saturday and already has a loss. They should still be in the top 25. Notre Dame loses to Northern Illinois.
How about Missouri?
Yeah, Missouri shouldn't even be in the top 25. Michigan State, Michigan 4-2. I don't know why they're still in it, and that's just disappointing. Ole Miss with 2 losses too, albeit to LSU and Kentucky. But Kentucky just lost to Vandy. Who's to say that they should still be in it? Sure, if they end up going back and beating whoever they play next week.
there's a lot of teams that have beat nobody.
Yep.
A lot of teams have beat nobody ahead of you, and Tech has won a lot of games against other teams who have beat a lot of people. I mean, even you look at the UNT game, we won by like 45 points, and UNT by a lot of metrics is like a top 50 team. They're an upper tier G5 team this year.
Yeah.
And so like we've got like 4 G5 teams ranked over Tech. So
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's funny with all the comments saying like, "Oh, we don't deserve it for the first 2 games." There's so much of that in the league right now. It's like, get out of here with that. Like, there are a lot of people.
Oregon like went toe to toe with Idaho and then just beat Ohio State.
Yeah,
Like so, like there's a ton of parity across college football right now. You've just got to go off of what people have actually done this year and vote.
your resume, what's actually happened on the football field, and go off of that on a week-to-week basis. And what Tech has done has gotten better every week. And so, obviously, that needs to continue. We need to go into Baylor, Baylor. We got to handle Baylor accordingly. But what do you think happens over the next couple of weeks?
Just tech-wise or AP poll? Because I think next couple of weeks, I think Iowa State has a bye upcoming, but they just play UCF. They'll stay in the top 10. If BYU, I don't know who they have this next week, but I don't think it's one of the top teams in the league. If they're not in the top 10 after starting 7-0 with their strength of record, then like I would be as frustrating it is as a Tech fan to be left out of the top 25 right now. I would be even like 10 times as angry as a BYU fan being left out of the top 10 because I don't think I could put them any lower than like 7.
Yeah,
with what they've done.
They have Oklahoma State, and it's funny.
Yeah.
Because I just sent something in the group where Danny Cannell had said like he has BYU, I think at like 5 or 7, and people are giving him a lot of guff, but he's like, look at what they've done this year. You know, that's what this is about. He's like, we need to get the teams that have name recognition out of the top 25 because they're simply not performing in a lot of instances. And all BYU has done, won every single one of their games convincingly in a lot of instances and handled business week in and week out. So the fact that they're outside of the top 10 is kind of crazy. I mean, the Big 12 should have 2 teams in the top 10. There are a lot of interesting teams in there, even with obviously Alabama and Georgia are always legit, but they both almost lose this week to nobodies. You know, they're whoever played Mississippi State, Georgia plays Mississippi State and only wins by 10. Like, okay, it's an SEC matchup, but come on, guys. You're supposed to be the big bad boys of the SEC.
Mississippi State wouldn't win any G5 league in the country right now. They're not good.
Yeah. And then, I mean, Alabama almost loses to South Carolina. They should have probably lost that game. And so, like, gosh, there's just so much parity in the league right now. I don't think there's very many heavy hitters. I know you have a different opinion on Texas than I do. I think Texas is really good, and you do too. But I know you mentioned that you still want to see more from them. Oregon looks like they were holding on to a couple of things. Iowa State, I mean, that may have been the game of the year, honestly. And then Penn State barely gets by USC. And USC is a good team, but you would like to see them win a little more convincingly and be able to handle the competition. I mean, even Miami has struggled against a bunch of teams this year. And so the list goes on and on about the top 25. I mean, I think we just got to get out of our heads about conferences. And it just seems like this is a type of year where there are not a bunch of extremely good teams. There's some good teams. And the average teams can compete with some of the good teams. And there's a lot of average teams this year.
I'll say that this is a great first year for the playoff to be happening.
Yeah, it would have been really tough with 4 teams for a lot of people to swallow the pills that would have been coming their way had we had a 14 playoff this year.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts? I think we've talked on this one.
I think we talked a lot of rankings. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, with that, Dallas, I'm going to let you start us off with the Baylor versus Texas Tech preview. Tell me what I know you've done a little bit of research, so tell me what you're thinking about.
Well, like just looking at some of like Baylor's basic like yards per play stats, this is a great matchup for Tech. Baylor's the best thing they do is stop the run, and they're not that great at it. They're 54th in the country in yards per rush on the defensive side of the ball. And with Taj Brooks at home, I'd love being able to get them out of that. They're 79th in yards per attempt on defense. I think the hammer it with Taj play action game that we've been running the last few weeks is set up perfectly. And then on their offensive side of the ball, I think Sawyer Robinson's a decent quarterback, but he hasn't been super efficient. They're 82nd in yards per pass attempt in the country, and then 86th in yards per rush. This is an offensive line that I think we're going to be able to bully. And they were talking about, if you follow some Baylor fans on Twitter, that they played like such great teams so far. They've lost to Utah, they've lost to BYU, they've lost to Kansas State or Iowa State.
This is Baylor.
Yeah, I'm missing one of their other games, but they've played solid defenses. So I am curious to see how it matches up against Tech. If these numbers are a little skewed because of that, or if, hey, they're just not a good defense, or they're not a good offense. So it'll be interesting. This is also a team that Colorado was their other loss. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Utah, Colorado, BYU, Iowa State.
Yeah. So good teams. They've played. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'd say Utah is a good team, but Cam Rising got hurt. They were dominating that. Cam Rising got hurt.
That was about to get out of hand very quickly, and he got hurt. So
they haven't beat a Power 4 team yet. They lost. Their only wins are Air Force and an FCS school. So this is your time. We just had this big rant about the AP poll and all that. Blow out Baylor and show everybody, hey, like, we can blow out bad teams too. These teams we've been playing lately are good. So.
Yeah, and to your point, or you brought up the schedule they have played, and that's what the Baylor fans are saying, and it has been. If you look at the names on that schedule, it hasn't been easy. So kudos to them for that, but they haven't done much with it either. If you want to talk about the one game where you can argue maybe a more traditional Big 12 high-power offense game, it's the Colorado game, to your point. And in that one, Sawyer Robinson goes 11 for 21, 148 yards and 2 touchdowns. Say something nice about Baylor. He rushed for almost 100 yards. He rushed for 82 yards and 9.1 yards a carry. So something to key in on is, I guess, the run game. If he does have that capability, that is something that we've struggled against, obviously, in the past. So that's probably a little bit worrisome. But outside of that, doesn't complete an awful lot of his passes.
He's a West Texas boy, so this is going to be – he's going to want to get his against Tech. I will say that. Well,
and we saw how that went against for us with Abilene Christian too.
Yeah.
So there's that going on. Stylistically, what do you think the offense does in this one? Where do you think our defense will succeed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would like to see us get like a little more explosive in the passing game. There's been, BYU was able to take advantage of them, especially early in the passing game. Colorado was able to, but I think this is a game you can really lean on Taj with. BYU and Colorado have kind of non-existent running games. BYU finally kind of got it together against Arizona this past week, but they really don't rely on their running backs to pick up a majority of their yards. I think Retzloff was the leading rusher coming into this last game. And so the one running back they faced that was like really solid was in Iowa State, and I think he averaged over 7 yards a carry and kind of did whatever he wanted. I think Taj can do that. And if Taj gets over 6 yards, to close to 7 yards a carry, Tech's not going to lose this game. So
That's a solid point. I'm looking at the Iowa State game right now, and they had two guys almost rushed for 100 yards, 15 carries, 107, 1597. So spot on with that. What else were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I was saying it's not a game you got to get cute. It's just execute. And I know this coaching staff wants to beat Baylor bad. So I'm not too worried about that as far as being focused for this game. I think we got the bye week at a good opportunity. There's a lot of momentum after going 3-0. This program hasn't started like that in a while. I think it was good to get healthy, reset. It sounds like we're going to get some guys back just from what they were leaking out during the week. It sounds like Chapman Lewis is already back and running, and so hopefully he's practicing this weekend, and you're getting some defensive ends back, which you desperately needed. So good things health-wise. I'm not too worried about Baron Morton. What we've talked about is he's been electric in the Jones this year. He's a different guy at home, and I'd expect him to be able to carve up a pretty porous Baylor secondary.
Yeah, and you've already said about the receivers. I was just looking at Higgins' game and Travis Hunter's game. I mean, man, they torched them. 8, 116, and I think Travis had 7 receptions for 130. So you talk about the big play ability, and Morton has showed a little bit more of that over the last couple of games, especially he's been throwing some dimes, honestly. Some of the passes he's been completing have been just chef's kiss, they've just been perfect, honestly. And so this is a spot for him where I do think we're going to be hammering the rock early and often because we're going to get that. I mean, it's going to be hard for them to stop Taj Brooks. And I think obviously that will always open up the pass game, but I just hope it can be like domination. Like you get a little bit of everything, and that's easy to say on the onset, right? Baylor hasn't looked good. But they have played tough competition.
They've hung with teams until the end. Like for the most, like they haven't been blown out. There's been quarters where they get just destroyed, but they've ultimately made most games a game late in matches. So it's not a team to overlook. They've got enough talent to beat you. They do, and they've got a coaching staff who is, they're coaching for their jobs. If Tech blows Baylor out, Aranda might not have a Monday morning press conference.
I was about to say something about that because we both had bye weeks this past week, and it's interesting. 2 teams in opposite direction, and Baylor can compete. They have enough talent, but you almost wonder how they're going to come out of the bye week. Do they feel bad for themselves, or are they going to come out and say, "Hey, we are a contender in the Big 12"? And are they going to save their season? And I don't know if it's a West Virginia type situation, but you don't want to be on the wrong side of it. I can't, and maybe that's the example is West Virginia last year where they came back. Any thoughts about Baylor going into the bye week and some things that maybe they had to key in on to resolve for Texas Tech specifically?
I mean, they've made just brutal mistakes in key points, and I feel like they've been a team that, when something goes against them, they let it affect them, and things start piling up. So, like, if Tech can get out to, like, an early 7-0 lead, get a stop, they might already be feeling like, oh, no, like, here it comes. Because I think that this is a team that mentally is kind of backed into a corner, and you need to put them out and put them out early, and don't let them start getting hope because they're going to want to. They're going to want to win the Butt Bowl. They're going to want to ruin Tech's season.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that, over the past week with the Butt Bowl and playing spoiler. And this is a game that you'd hate for that to happen. Coming out of the bye week, we're talking about deserving to be ranked. And so I don't think we have a staff that would allow a letdown spot, especially to what you've already said, a staff that honestly wants to beat the Baylor staff. Joey being there for, a few years, probably feeling slighted in a couple of instances. He'll never say it, but I could definitely see why he would mark this game. And with it being at the Jones, you want Killy to draw something up with the first 15 and hopefully get 2 touchdowns out of it early and get out to a 14-0 lead or something like that. So I do think this one's books, Mark, for the coaching staff. I think Joey's not going to allow us to have a letdown spot. And so then it comes down to the players not making mistakes. And I don't know if Baylor's been able to force turnovers very often. I know they've had a few turnovers, and so you don't want to make stupid mistakes to allow them to get the lead by any means.
I'll tell you the turnover margin for them right now. Baylor is 90th in the country in turnover margin.
Yep. And so let's not start them. Let's not start this game.
Let's keep that up. Tech is 41st.
Yeah. And so be opportunistic with the turnovers if we can get him this game. Sawyer Robinson looks like he does a pretty decent job of not turning it over. I think it was 3 picks to 9 touchdowns. I don't know what his fumble ratio looks like. For me, really have to focus on him running the ball. Doesn't look like their running backs are getting too much penetration, but for my keys would be keying on him running the ball, and then also the Red Raiders getting healthy. So that's what are your keys for the game?
Yeah, I think that I think get Taj going early and often, and don't be afraid to push the ball down the field. There's been times I feel like the offense gets into a little bit of a dink and dunk in the passing game. Obviously with the RPO action, you've kind of got to do that because you can't have linemen getting downfield. But I think that we've got some guys that can burn them. Douglas showed what he can do last game down the field. So, and Josh Kelly was definitely not 100%. There was a few times he was limping around with his foot injury or whatever it is. So getting him 100%, I think, will be a big difference maker.
Yeah, I don't think they're doing this by any means, but it'd be really cool to unleash Micah Hudson this game. He's kind of kept him under wraps, but if this could be his coming out party, that would be pretty cool.
It does. I mean, it does feel like they've been trying to get him on the field more and more often. And boy, when they target him downfield, I feel like he's always open.
Yeah.
And so, when Will Hammond came in, he was able to get the ball to him pretty easily. And so I think that the further we go on, and after a bye week's like a great opportunity with some of your other receivers getting rest, get Micah a ton of reps. Because if we can add him to that wide receiver room as that 4th guy, I think that just raises the ceiling of this offense tremendously.
Yeah, it adds another. You mentioned Douglas having some of that this past game, but he can really blow the top off of a defense in sure hands as well. So you talk about what that can do for this offense. It'll be really exciting to see. With that being said, just to get a prediction out of you. So right now the line is Texas Tech -6.5 with an over under 57.5. How do you think this game plays out? What's the score in this one?
I'm going to say this is 41-17 Texas Tech. I think I think they jump on them early and keep them down. Joey knows. I think the Jones. This is going to be the best environment of the year. I think everybody's, seeing what kind of product we have and is actually getting excited about it. So let's get rowdy. Kill Baylor, kill them.
I was going to make it a little bit closer, but since you jumped out to that score, I'll go ahead and give us a. What was I going to say? A 38-24 victory. So I think we'll be able to jump on them early. I think that obviously it's a very important game for Baylor, especially for the rest of their season. And so I think that they'll remain in it. But my hope is that we can show what kind of team we are, cover, and win outright. So it's a little bit what I think of this. We have the tools to do it. At this point, we just need to keep stacking wins and worry about the opponent that's in front of us.
Yeah, well said.
Are there any final thoughts that you have about Texas Tech?
No, man. Just like you said, keep winning. This is fun.
Yeah, it's great. 5-1, 3-0 in the Big 12. I don't know if we've ever been able to say that, at least recently. So let's just let the good times keep rolling.
I was in high school.
Yep. I was my freshman year in college. So there's that. So yeah, wrecking, baby. Texas Tech. Hey, everybody, thank y'all for joining us today. If you could do us a favor, like and subscribe, follow us on X, Instagram, and all the other social media platforms we have. Dallas and I appreciate you joining us on Tortilla Talk today. And with that being said, wreck 'em.